parable of the lost sheep, of the lost coin, and the lost son. And Jesus purposely tells two parables with missing pieces. The first two, about the lost sheep and the lost coin, both end with, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 who don't need to repent. And yet, in the story of the coin, he didn't say anything about repentance. In the story of the sheep, same thing. There's not a word about repentance. So he purposely tells two stories with missing pieces, so that by the time we hear about the lost son, we're wondering about repentance. Now Luke is very careful to tell us that this parable is told to a mixed crowd. Remember, Luke always shows us parables at work. So there are the sinners and there are the righteous people. So very important if you're going to understand this parable. Because remember, part of the power of a parable is identification. Who is going to identify with which character? So keep that in mind. But you know the story. The prodigal son, the younger son, who's, as far as I'm concerned, far less interesting than the older son. But the younger son demands his inheritance, and he leaves. And he wastes it all, riotous living. He ends up feeding pigs, which is about as low as you can sink if you're a young Jewish man. He decides he's going to come back to his father, and he rehearses this little lame speech all along the way. Just let me be, one of your servants, let me be one of your slaves. So he makes it home, and the father's waiting on a road like this, and from a long distance he sees this prodigal returning, and he goes running, embraces the son. The son doesn't even get his whole little lame speech out. He just starts it, and the father smothers him with a robe and a ring and shoes and a banquet. It's just over the top forgiveness. And what you need to know is this is a parable about hesed. This is a parable about mercy. And Jesus has already defined it for us in chapter 6. He says that God is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Who is more ungrateful and so cute? So the father in the story, who represents God, just showers hesed on this Lord. So much that he didn't deserve, he gets. But the really interesting character, as far as I'm concerned, is the older brother. Nobody ever talks about him. He's off in the shadows. He doesn't like the fact that his father is so merciful. And he hears the party going on, symphonos. Luke uses the Greek word, orchestrated music going on. And he asks, what's happened? One of the slaves says, your brother has come home, we're celebrating. And he is angry. And here's the real revealing line. The older brother says, here I've been slaving all my life. The question is, who's the real slave? The young brother who comes back and says, just let me be your servant. Or the older brother who's done all the right things, but whose heart does not understand mercy. It's a story about a world turned upside down. It's a story about a person who should have understood it, the older brother who didn't, and the younger brother who seems to understand that he can ask for something he doesn't deserve. The valley that we're overlooking goes all the way to Jericho. You see the green trees down there where they will be able to find water on the journey, that final journey up from Jericho to Jerusalem, that journey that is so captivating Luke's imagination. He spent 40% of the gospel telling us that story. Along the way, a very religious man came up to Jesus. They were in the crowd all along around him, asking questions and trying to trick him. And this man asked a pretty basic rabbinic question: what's the greatest commandment? Jesus throws the question right back at him. How's it written? What do you say? And he gives the textbook answer. The answer you could wake this guy up at 3 in the morning and press his nose, and this is the answer he would give you. He knows the answer to the question that he's asked. Love God and love your neighbor. That's the law. In and out is the law. And Jesus says, okay, you got it. But Luke tells us that this man wants to justify himself. And so he asks a further question of Jesus. He should have just kept his mouth shut. He said, and who is my neighbor? So this is a parable. Again, Luke is giving situation of the telling of the parable is told for this man who just asked this question. And he tells a story about a nameless man who was traveling down this road, very dangerous road, a lot of bandits. And he's beaten, overtaken by these men of violence, and he's left for dead. Now, Jericho is a city of priests, so the priest and the Levite come along, and they pass by this man. They don't show him mercy. But then the Samaritan, of all the people who should not get it, the Samaritans are the most hated group by the Jews. This man should not have gotten it. But guess what? He stops. And he shows over-the-top love. He doesn't just bandage the guy up. He puts him on his donkey. He takes him to the inn. He spends the night in the inn to make sure he's okay. The next morning, he leaves money to pay for any cost he might incur. It says, I'm coming back. Mercy, hesed, is always over the top. And that's what the Samaritan shows. So the story is all told. And Jesus comes back to the religious man and says, okay, which one was the neighbor? And isn't it interesting? His answer is the one who showed mercy.
So which of these three do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, he who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 10.
We've come to the end of the long journey, the journey that began at the foot of the Mount of Transfiguration, all the way up to Jordan Valley. And behind us, in the midst there is Jericho, their last stop before Jerusalem. And there, in the city of Jericho, Jesus meets the poster child for this new value system, this radically reversed kingdom that he's been talking about. He's called Matthew to be a tax collector as one of his disciples. But now, as he enters Jericho, there's a chief tax collector waiting for him. His name is Zacchaeus. And he's a little short man, so we know about him from Sunday school. We all sing the song. He climbs up in a sycamore tree. And as Jesus is going into town, Jericho is a city of priests, and Jesus is going to stay with a chief tax collector. Now, let's be clear. Zacchaeus is not misunderstood. He is a bad man. He is a man who has stolen from his people, and he is much hated amongst the Jews. But he stands up in front of Jesus and says he's going to restore whatever he's stolen 4 times. That's the restoration that the law provides for someone who's a thief. So he's confessing that he's a thief. And yet he's gleefully ready to give that money back because repentance has come into his life and he's recognized the value system of this new kingdom, and most especially Jesus, who is the representative of that kingdom. And it all happened just over there in the midst. Just as they're about to make their way to Jerusalem, Zacchaeus, the little con man, is waiting there for Jesus.
Then Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. Now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. And he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was of short stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him, and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house. So he made haste and came down, and received him joyfully. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 19.
Here we are at last, the end of that long journey up the Jordan Valley to Jerusalem. Here we are, outside the gates of the city. Jesus and his disciples would have come over the Mount of Olives. And it was here that they paused for a while. He sent his disciples into town to fetch a donkey. He would enter the city, in the words of Zechariah 9:9, humble and seated on the foal of the donkey. As they're coming down that hill, they start singing a song, Psalm 18, celebrating the fact that they're here. The Passover crowd is all around them. And then here's Jesus with his group of disciples around him, and they're all celebrating. They've just seen the miracles. The man as they cross the valley and Jesus enters, the walls, these enormous walls begin to loom in front of him. You can see the Golden Gate. That's the gate most people believe he entered through. Jesus can see in his prophetic imagination what's going to happen here in 70 AD. And Titus will surround the city. There will be tremendous loss of life. They will crucify people all around the city until they run out of wood. And Jesus is overcome. And he prophesies what's going to happen to the city, and he bursts into tears. Now, this is traditionally called the triumphal entry, but what you have to realize is as Jesus is entering that gate, he's still wiping the tears from his eyes.
Now as he drew near, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, If you had known, even you, especially in this your day, the things that make for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you and close you in on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground. And they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 19.
The second temple cleansing is the first hiccup in the chronology of Passion Week. Some Gospels say it's the first thing Jesus did when he arrived in Jerusalem. Some say it happened the day after, so that's another issue. But the important thing to remember in Luke is that the temple cleansing in Luke is tied to Jesus' concern for prayer. Remember, Luke is the gospel of prayer. The first public thing Jesus did in John 2 was tear up the marketplace in the temple. It's the first time he'd seen it there. The last public thing Jesus did was to tear up the temple, and that happened during this period of time. He goes in, he casts the traders, the people that are selling merchandise out, also that he can establish a quiet place so that the Gentiles can pray. There's our concern for the universality of the gospel and the Gentiles, and our concern for prayer as well. And at this point, the Passion Week settles into a rhythm, Luke says. He comes every day here to the temple to teach and to share the good news.
Then he went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in it, saying to them, It is written, My house is a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 19.
We're just outside the ancient wall of the Temple Mount. The stones behind me are from Herod's time, these beautifully dressed stones. And in the background, you can hear a celebration. It's a bar mitzvah that's going on. So, pretty neat setting. Jesus says surprisingly little about the second coming, about the end of the world. But the lengthiest pronouncement happened here, just outside the temple. What you have to realize is that Jesus was asked two questions, and they gave two answers. That's the point. The problem is Luke only gives us the first question. He didn't give us the second question, so it can be confusing. As they're leaving the temple area, Luke tells us that Jesus' disciples point out the beautiful stones. Mark says, look how massive these stones are, is what his disciples said. Some of these stones are larger than any of the stones in the pyramids. And Jesus is tense. He says, you see these stones? Not one stone is going to be left on top of the other. And that's when the questions come. The first question is, when will these things happen? Second question, which is in Matthew 24, is, and what will be the signs of the coming of the end of the age? So two questions, two answers. This is a pattern that Jesus always follows. He begins with very concrete signs. He describes an event that you can run away from. He says, when it happens, if you're on the top, in the top of your roof, run down and get yourself and run away. Because he's describing a historical event that you can run away from. He's describing the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. And these are the stones that the Roman soldiers threw over the walls when they literally stone upon the other. At that point, Jesus shifts to apocalyptic language. It's a very clear shift. He goes from describing an event you can run away from to describing an event that you cannot run away from. And he says, the moon will turn to blood, the stars will fall from the sky. Luke, it says, celestial beings will be shaken. And he's describing the end of the world, an event that no one can imagine.
Watch therefore, and pray always, that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. And in the daytime he was teaching in the temple, but at night he went out and stayed on a mountain called Olivet. Then early in the morning, all the people came to him in the temple to hear him. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 21.
Any thoughts on that? Last comments before we end this evening? On the video there?
I think the book of John, wait a minute, we're in Luke.
He did bring up the thing about Jesus turning over the tables twice, where, Pastor John talked about that earlier on in one of our sessions, that he kind of thinks it was just a Jewish way of telling a story. It doesn't necessarily mean that it happened more than once. It could have, I suppose. I kind of lean towards the one-time thing, like a one and done. Whether it was the beginning or the end, I don't know. I kind of think it was near the end, but again, I don't know. It's hard to say sometimes on those things, and I don't know how important that. We know it happened, but how important it is as far as how many times.
Did you happen to see the actual stones he brought through? How did they weren't little.
No. We think that the farther back in time we go back towards cavemen, but we weren't stupid, and we really, again, God helping these people to do things, and the mind that the Egyptians had to build pyramids.
And that stuff's still standing, some of that, those walls and things.
Yeah, show me a house from
Right.
right.
What's amazing too is, I'm reading through the Old Testament. I'm reading 1 Kings and that, and when Solomon builds the temple, they didn't want to even have any of the stones hewn on site, so they cut all the stones at the quarry and brought them in and put them in place. I mean, when you look at how tightly some of those fit and how huge they were, the craftsmanship to be able to make stuff like that and measure and fit it together so precisely,
And then haul
it and put it in place, because they didn't want any hammers or any tools to be used, because they thought it would desecrate the holiness of that place. So if you read that, it actually says that in there, that they didn't want any of the stones or anything, and nothing was to be worked on in that area in the temple when Solomon was having it built. I think that's impressive. But yeah, I think of that too. I know that Ken Ham talks about that. How different archaeological things that they found shows, if anything, rather than getting smarter with technology, we're getting dumber, because we can't figure out how they did some of the things they did without the tools and technology that we have. how did they pull this stuff off? You know, how these feats of engineering, it's baffling.
Yeah, and look at the art, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It's just,
I was thinking the same thing.
wow.
When you look at the art,
How's that possible?
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is,
But, yeah, I think we've lost a lot of,
yeah.
mental capacity as we devolved.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're gonna have like a class, intro to heaven, you know, and we all show up, okay, get in the auditorium, folks, we got a little briefing for you, I'll show you how this was done.
Yeah.
It's not quantity, it's quality.
Yeah. They didn't have the pagers going off and
Yeah.
their phones distracting them.
Yeah, we live in a world of distractions. Alrighty, well, we'll dismiss for now and, go in peace and, keep Pastor John and Debbie in prayers, that they weather this well and that there's really no, hopefully any major thing. And, we'll hopefully see him on Sunday and back next week. So I believe next week is our last week
It's, potluck.
and it's potluck.
Wednesday.
So,
Okay.
bring a covered dish, Larry.
Yeah, I will.
Covered in dish, we love it.